So I'm back for another instalment of my Coverlet of Comfort series, and in this video I'm going to be showing you the stitching that I did for September. And just in case you're catching this video for the first time, this year I've been following along tutorials with a lovely lady called Kathryn on her YouTube channel, which is K3N Cloth Tales. And as always, there's links and more information in the description below. So each month she's been setting a theme which is based around ourselves and our place in the wider world. So I had this idea from quite early on that for each month of the year I'd have 12 panels on my coverlet or on my quilt, and I had the idea that they'd be like 12 chapters in an autobiography. And for September, Kathryn had chosen the theme of the balance of light and shade. And obviously that can be interpreted in various ways. You know, I could have looked at it from the point of view of my artwork, of like literal light and shade when I'm drawing or painting. But I kept coming back to this idea of it being light and shade in life. So we have brighter times and we have darker times, and obviously we hope that the brighter, happier times will outweigh the sadder times. And obviously a lot of that is out of our control, but very often it's down to our own mindset. You know, if we choose to look for the positives in as many situations as possible, then we will feel like the light and the good outweighs the bad, even if a lot of bad stuff happens that's out of our control. So that's kind of how I was thinking in a general sense, but I really struggled this month to kind of try and find a way to convey that in a more specific, personal way for me, for my autobiography. So the stitching I did this month actually looks more similar to what Kathryn produced than any other month has done, because normally I take her theme and her suggestions and then I'm like, oh, I like that bit, I like that bit, and then I have another idea of my own and then I go off in my own direction, usually with kind of a story in mind, to convey in quite a literal sense, in a sort of a pictorial way. But this month I've been a little bit more constrained to just a general idea rather than having a specific story for you. Although there was one idea that I kept coming back to, but I didn't know how to convey it, and I didn't even know if I wanted to convey it. And that was the thought of, you know, I've got lots of happy memories of time that I spent with my husband, but also grief since he died. And that balance of those happy memories with the sadness. So although that was sort of in the back of my mind, that's not really what this piece is specifically about. It's just in a more general sense, as I've already mentioned, you know, for all of us, we have happier times and sadder times, and how we find the balance in life. Okay, so let me show you in closer detail what I actually did this month. So as usual, this piece is approximately 16 by 16 inches. Oh, and by the way, because this is the 9th month, if you stick around to the end of this video, I'll show you what it looks like, because I will attach July, August and September onto the bottom of the first 6 months that I showed you at the end of the June video. I didn't actually start this until kind of mid-September, because I was umming and ahhing so much about what I wanted to actually do. And in the end, I just got to that point where I was like, just do what Kathryn's done and something will come from it. So what she'd suggested to do was to have some lighter and darker shades. And as she said, she didn't want to go stark like black and white, because many things in life are not that black and white. So I kind of chose this kind of blue and white theme. So for my darker colours, I've got this kind of denim-y blue colour, and then this kind of check. I guess it's quite a fine check. And then also this blue, which has got like a floral leafy kind of pattern on it, which was from an old skirt of mine. This one, by the way, was from a shirt which had been my granddad's, and then this was just from something I bought in a charity shop. And then on the lighter colours, I've got this kind of just pale blue, which is the same fabric I used for the sea in July when I did the globe made out of hexagons. And then I've got this one, which is white with blue florals, which I think was from a blouse that I think I bought at a car boot sale years ago. And then also one which is just white, but it's got an embroidered pattern on it. So those were my kind of light and shade choices. So I had 6 different fabrics, and then as it turned out I ended up with 6 rows. So each one of these rows has got one of each of the 6 fabrics in. And what Kathryn had suggested doing was stitching like a checkerboard, but wonky. So it's kind of in that sort of like lighter darker pattern, but none of the corners line up. Although actually I think in the middle here there were some that lined up, but I kind of knew that I'd end up covering parts of it. And when I actually stitched the background together, it was actually this way round. I did it in vertical strips, and I'll put a picture on the screen so you can see kind of what it was like when it was mostly put together, and you can get the idea of how I was kind of making a strip and then joining it on to the rest of the block. And then after it was all joined together, I added a plain backing fabric. So I will also insert a picture of what the patchwork part of it looked like from behind before I put the backing on. So at that point I had the whole of the background done, and Kathryn had suggested doing circles again with sort of the lighter and the darker colours sort of split on the circle, not necessarily directly in the centre, but kind of offset one way or another. So some would be a little bit more on the shady side and some would be more on the light side. Anyway, I did several circles like that, and I tried various different layouts, and I just was not happy with it. I couldn't figure out if I had too many circles or not enough, if they were too big or too small. And I ended up, some of the bigger ones I trimmed down smaller, and then it was like, oh, I still don't like it. So I ended up just putting it away. And at that point I actually went on holiday for a week with my mum and dad. So I under normal circumstances I would have liked to have taken it with me to do while I was on holiday, but because I was in such a state over what I was doing, and I couldn't find a layout that I liked, and so it was like, right, I am not taking that with me on holiday. And I ended up just doing sketching and watercolour on holiday, which was lovely. And then after I came back, I had another go at this. And I decided that I would overlap some of the circles, and I was more happy with that. I don't know why. I could say some deep and meaningful thing about how bad things sometimes overlap with good things, but I'd just be making that up after the fact. That wasn't my thought process at all. I just preferred how it looked with some overlapped. And I knew I wanted to stitch some wording onto it as well. And again, I really struggled finding quotes that I liked. I was looking up quotes about, you know, be a light in the darkness, and even the darkest hour only lasts 60 minutes, and so many like interesting quotes about light and shade, or light and dark, but none of them really felt right. And then I remembered this scripture in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Now it's quite a long passage, and I've just picked out, you know, a couple of verses. And this one here, a time to weep and a time to laugh. And I thought, yep, that captures it perfectly. Not that there's a specific time, but sometimes we weep about stuff, and sometimes we laugh about stuff. And sometimes we laugh about the things that make us weep. For anybody who's not religiously inclined and is not interested in the Bible verse, well, you can think about the Birds song, Turn, 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 because this is the portion of scripture that's the song lyrics are based on. And then I also did this other one, a time to rip apart and a time to sew together. And I'd been thinking of this for quite some time. At some point I'd like to get this verse into my stitching, because it's just so good. And especially for the slow stitch, you know, when we are literally often ripping apart and then sewing back together. And as I said, that's from the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And then these two specific parts are from verses 4 and 7. And in Kathryn's video, she'd done different edgings around all her circles, or not necessarily different on all of them, but she'd used quite a few different techniques with how she sort of stitched the edging of her circles. But on all of mine, I'd just done the blanket stitch around the edge of all the circles. And then around the outside of the circles, I'd done multiple rows of running stitch. And where there are sort of two close together, you know, at some point the lines merge between the two circles. And then also here, like where they overlap, I've just kind of continued to outline the shape. And you can probably see, although it's easier to see on the back, that I used a variegated blue thread. And I used the same variegated thread when I did the blanket stitch around the edge of the circles, but that's less noticeable, I think. And because I'd struggled a little bit to find a story in this piece, I was beginning to think that, wow, it's September, it's getting near the end of the year, you know, perhaps I'm not going to find so much meaning in, you know, the next few prompts. And I had actually thought much earlier in the year, if there's ever a month where Kathryn does a theme that I don't particularly like, or I don't want to do, I'll just make up one of my own. But then when it got to this point, and then I was thinking, shall I persevere with this one, or shall I do a different theme of my own? And I could not think of a single thing, because we've had so many good themes this month that have covered so many different aspects, that I've been able to, you know, share so many stories about my life, and I couldn't think of anything else. And not that I objected to this theme, but as I've said multiple times already, I just didn't have a particular story to convey. It was just more in a general sense. But having said that, if you like my stories, wait until October's piece, because October I have got so many stories to tell you, and I was so excited about October. So please don't think that I'm being overly negative about this one. It's just I like the end result. I just wasn't as excited about this one as some of the others. but I was very excited about October. Stick around, and as I say, in a moment I'll show you the 9 months of the year all joined together, and then make sure you come back for October, especially if you're somebody that likes listening to all my waffly stories about my life, because there are a lot of them, and it's going to be a real test of my willpower to keep the video to a reasonable length. So here it is, 9 months joined together. So we had self, home, special places, friends, fauna, flora, my place, my ancestral lines, and then the current one, the balance of light and shade. And at the time when I'm filming this, I've almost finished my November piece. So it feels like it's getting really close to completion. And then after all the pieces are attached, as I've mentioned before, I will add the strip up the sides as well as the last thing that I do. And then I will also decide whether I'm going to keep these strips just plain or whether I'm going to add extra stitch in. But that will be a decision for early next year, I guess, whether I want to carry on stitching on this or whether when the 12 pieces are done, it's done. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you've watched all of the videos up until this point, thank you very much. And don't forget, I've got lots of stories for you when I film my October piece, so I hope you'll enjoy that too. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye for now.